urgent situation using the telephone. Please follow these simple steps to utilize our telephone paging system. 1. Pick up the phone and dial the paging extension that corresponds with the site you are at. Example, Fairmount is 4000. 2. Once you dial the 4-digit extension, you will hear, "Welcome to the single-wire Informacast system," and then a beep. 3. After the beep, speak through the handset, and your voice will be heard throughout the clinic. 4. When you are done, be sure to hang up your handset. To avoid paging the wrong clinic, please dial the extension that corresponds with the site you are at. For questions on how to operate the paging system, please contact the IT department at extension 4357 to assist with paging issues.
This is an Informacast live audio broadcast.
One of the first things you should be familiar with are the emergency codes, and you'll see these posted throughout your site. Code Red is a fire emergency. If you see a fire, raise the alarm at the nearest pull station and dial 911 immediately. If the fire alarm is not available, notify site personnel about the fire by paging Code Red over the intercom system 3 times, and the appropriate messages will be sent to the people involved in responding to the scene. Emergency evaluation procedures. Staff should leave the building in a quick but orderly fashion using the designated escape routes. Assist patients and those with disabilities towards the exits. The duties of staff are to move people to specified areas, assist other staff when needed in moving patients and visitors to safety, and evacuate with the other staff. When possible, close the doors as you leave in order to avoid the spread of smoke and fire. Closed doors help to contain smoke and fire throughout the building. Do not use the elevators. In the Fairmount building, there are 2 stairways at both ends of the building. Please use the stairways to evacuate and gather at the assembly location located across from the clinic near the alleyway. Additionally, all LMFC departments have been assigned specific areas of assembly if an evacuation is necessary. Satellite locations are across the street in the parking lot. Assemble in the designated areas to account for staff, patients, and visitors. Once the building is evacuated, listen for additional instruction. Remain outside until the clinic manager or competent authority announces that it's safe to re-enter by announcing "All clear Code Red" 3 times. All facilities have a no smoking policy inside the clinic or within 25 feet of an entrance. Clinic floor plans with evacuation routes have been posted throughout the facility. Please take time to notice evacuation routes posted to be familiar with your building. They show the locations of exit signs, evacuation routes, fire extinguishers, and fire alarms. You should be familiar with primary and alternate exits to be used in a fire location and proper use of firefighting equipment, pull stations, and fire-related equipment within the departments. Most fire extinguishers operate using the following pass technique. P. Pull. Pull the pin. This will also break the tamper seal. A. Aim. Aim low, pointing the extinguisher nozzle at the base of the fire. S. Squeeze. Squeeze the handle to release the extinguishing agent. S. Sweep. Sweep from side to side at the base of the fire until it appears to be out. Watch the area. Fight the fire only if the fire department has been notified, the fire is small and is not spreading to other areas. Escaping the area is possible by backing up to the nearest exit. The fire extinguisher is in working condition and staff is trained to use it.
The whole deal is at a safe distance when you're approaching this small fire, you pull, aim, spray, and sweep, I think is what it is. Is that what it is, Keith? Squeeze. Yeah, squeeze, spray, and sweep. Sorry, it's been 2 years since I've given the class. I'll give you all the information, it's just not as organized. Anyways, squeeze and sweep. One of the things that, and you guys will see this today, is you're in no danger of making the fire extinguisher go holding this handle, because the handle that you're holding, the weight on, isn't what makes it go. it's actually pushing down this handle that makes it go. So, you know, when you pull the pin, you're like, well, now what do I, you know, but the deal is, as long as you don't push down on this, it doesn't go, okay? So I can do anything I want to holding this, okay? And I can even have my thumb on here. It's when I push down is when the agent comes out, okay? So it's, oh, and the thing about pulling the pin is, okay, don't worry about the pin. They make pins by the dozens, by the thousands, okay? We'll get another pin, okay? So today, when you get the pin, I literally want you to pull it in one motion and just let go of it, okay? The pin is not our concern at all. We don't need to put it in our pocket. We don't need to save it for later. You got to practice it the way you're going to do it in a real emergency, okay? So the pin is not a concern. Trust me, that 5-cent pin doesn't mean anything to anybody. So we're going to pull the pin, and this one happens to be connected, okay? But basically, when you pull the pin, there's a little seal on there, and it's going to be a little bit tough. You kind of have to, you might have to go like this, but when you pull it, just let go, okay? Get your hose out, aim, and then squeeze, and what you're going to do is you're going to sweep the fire. And the thing is, again, this is comfort zone, and this is one of the things you're going to work on today. I don't care if you go, okay, I'm going to aim, I'm going to squeeze. I don't know how far this thing's going to shoot. I'm starting here, okay? And you go like that, and you realize you're still 5 feet away. Let off the trigger, get a little closer, and then start your sweeping motion and kind of move in, okay? It's okay to start too far away. I'd rather have you start too far away than be right on top of it and have something splash back on you or something like that. So everything clear as mud so far? Okay. We went over what kind of extinguishers there are, A, B, and C. Always keep in your mindset that if anything doesn't go exactly as planned, we're leaving now, okay? That's all, you have your avenue of escape. All right, who's our first victim? Why don't we start out with someone that actually has done this before and is feeling comfortable about it anyway, just so that the other people can watch. And let's get closer. Can we see what they do? Let me, I'll do a dry run, okay? Basically, I'm not going to pull the pin because that's your fun. This is sealed, okay? You're going to have to break that seal, okay? Pull this out. You're going to come up and start sweeping and get closer and closer. You're going to feel heat from the fire.
I feel it over here.
Okay. It's all you. There you go. Remember, just throw the pin in the ground.
Okay.
You're up. Sweep. Sweep. Look. There you go. Okay, stop. Go light it again, please. The only benefit you don't get is breaking the seal, but that's okay.
Oh, it is heavy.
Okay. All right, well, hurry up if you're going to start that far back. Stay low, sweep low, base of the fire, stay low. Okay, that's good.
Oh, good.
Take the pin out and throw it out. There you go. And now you have an idea of how close you have to get to be effective, don't you? Okay, stay low. Go ahead. Okay, that's good. Just an easy sweep. I liked your invigoration there, but just a nice steady sweep back and forth. Yep. Next.
Oh, it is heavy. So if this thing is already out, it's no good then?
Right. But yeah, let's go ahead and do this. Let's get your hose out. Throw the pin away. Why are you keeping the pin? Okay. Sweep side to side at the base of the fire. Go ahead. Let's get a little closer. You go to the base of the fire. Base of the fire. Farther down. Lower. There you go. You got it. Stop. The deal is you got to get that base of the fire. You got to go low, and it's just a slow sweep, okay? Just low. The flames really aren't what's the damage. It's down at the fuel.
Okay. It made us steamy. Well, that
There you go. There you go. Grab the hose. Start spraying a little farther away and work your way in, okay? Go ahead. You got it. All right. Just keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on it. Okay. Back away. It's a disadvantage to start with a lesser than full extinguisher because it doesn't have the power.
Provision for handling emergencies and unusual occurrences. La Maestra recognizes that medical emergencies and unusual occurrences do happen, and has adopted guidelines to prepare staff members for these unexpected events. A code blue indicates a patient requiring resuscitation or otherwise in need of immediate medical attention, i.e. chest pain or difficulty breathing, most often as the result of a respiratory arrest or cardiac arrest. When a patient is identified as a code blue, the overhead page takes the form of code blue to alert the designated staff team for code blue in each department to provide personnel for a code blue coverage. Employees who witness or are first on site of code blue will take immediate action, using the overhead paging system to call a code blue, summoning medical assistance, and will assist as directed. Procedure 1. If there is a medical emergency, the first person to respond will assess patient, begin CPR, and call for assistance in paging code blue. 2. Staff team for code blue will perform assigned tasks. 3. The procedure will continue until emergency medical transport arrives and takes over. 4. The provider or nurse will give report to the emergency medical transport and assist in the procedure until the patient is transported. 5. The nurse will document the event in patient's medical chart. An incident report will be completed. 6. If the patient's relative is not available, the nurse or provider will notify the emergency contacts regarding the condition and location of the patient. 7. After the incident, the crash cart is restocked and oxygen is inspected for needed replacements. 8. For medical emergencies in the dental clinics, staff will respond to the emergency and page code blue for medical assistance. Dental staff will manage crowds as well as provide support to family members. The dentist on duty will stand by for orders from the physician in charge. Code green is defined as a patient or visitor acting agitated, and staff therefore requires security assistance. In the instance of an unusual occurrence, all employees who witness or are first on site will take immediate action, using the overhead paging system to call a code green. The clinics have their own security system with a security guard visible during office hours. A code green page will summon other staff members, especially male members, via intercom to help calm an agitated patient or visitor to prevent unnecessary harm. Staff members will be trained to identify a code green as instances when a patient or visitor is agitated. Another reason to call a code green, besides dissatisfaction of service, is that a patient may be under the influence of drugs and/or alcohol. Procedure: La Maestra maintains a security guard to be visible during office hours. In the event of a patient or visitor becoming angry, and in an effort to defuse the situation, a code green will be called on the paging system. Code green is recognized as the term used by staff members to summon other staff members, especially male members, via intercom to help calm an agitated patient or visitor to prevent unnecessary harm to everyone in the clinic. When a person becomes agitated and the staff is unable to defuse the situation, the receptionist will page code green. The respective staff members will respond to the page, and while the patient or visitor is being calmed, other staff members will clear the area of other patients and call the police if necessary. To ensure that these policies and procedures are followed, education will be provided to all staff members to react appropriately in the event of a medical emergency, code blue, and non-medical emergency, agitated patient, code green. La Maestra is committed to best practices in providing a safe and secure approach to emergency preparedness and management. The emergency preparedness plan includes hazards which may affect the clinic most, such as disruption of service and fire and medical emergencies. La Maestra's emergency management approach considers the main health center size, 3 floors with underground parking garages. Locations: satellite clinics located throughout San Diego County. The community: culturally diverse community with 20+ languages. Patient demographic: patients with mental or behavioral illnesses, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, patients with chronic disease. The continuity of operations plan is an effort to ensure that primary essential functions continue to be performed during a wide range of emergencies, including localized acts of nature, accidents, and technological or attack-related emergencies. The continuity of operations plan is an effort to ensure that the capability exists to continue essential agency functions across a wide range of potential emergencies. The objectives of a co-op plan include ensuring the continuous performance of an agency's essential functions or operations during an emergency, protecting essential facilities, equipment, records, and other assets, reducing or mitigating disruptions to operations, reducing loss of life, minimizing damage and losses, and achieving a timely and orderly recovery from an emergency and resumption of full service to customers. Emergency electrical power. If the clinic's electrical power supply is compromised or unavailable, the Chief Medical Officer will determine whether the clinic should remain open. If it appears that electrical power will be resumed in a short time, staff should continue care as best as possible. If a portion of the clinic is incapable of supporting patient care, but total evacuation is not required, patients will be served in unaffected areas of the clinic that are able to safely provide services. The incident command staff works to establish continuity of operation with information technology. Chart Guard. To continue patient care during a disruption of service, LMFC utilizes Chart Guard at every clinic site, which automatically generates 3 days' worth of clinical charts for pending patients as a backup in the event of an electronic health record (EHR) system outage. Providers should transition to paper charts to continue care as best as possible. ChartGuard will generate the patient information needed to continue care. If it is determined that the power will not be resumed before the end of the business day, he or she may close the clinic. Generators which provide lighting and medication refrigeration can provide temporary electrical power to accomplish essential business functions. Water disruption. Specific reasons for a water disruption can include fire, severe weather, earthquake, electrical power outage, construction accident, or planned water outage. Some effects that a water disruption may have on the clinic are patient hygiene, staff hand washing, drinking at faucets, flushing toilets, and fire sprinkler systems. During a water disruption, plans should be made for the use of hand pumps to be used if decontamination needs to be postponed. For a temporary disruption of water services, 8 hours or less, water supply sources should be derived from 5-gallon commercially bottled waters placed throughout the clinic. Portable restrooms and hand wash sink stations will be provided in response to the clinic's needs. Essential functions for hygiene should be kept to a minimum. Departments can use substitute products for hygiene such as hand sanitizers, latex gloves, and antibacterial hand wipes. If the clinic's drinking water supply is contaminated or unavailable for extended periods, the Chief Medical Officer will determine whether the clinic should remain open. The most serious decision in the event of an internal flood is partial or full evacuation of the building. Usually during any internal flood, unless there is a direct threat to patients or employees in other areas of the building, only the affected area will be activated. If there is a direct threat to the safety of individuals in the area, then employees should initiate evacuation of the area immediately. During an internal flood, general evacuation procedure should be followed and activated. If there is no immediate danger, the extent of damage and threat will be assessed by clinic managers, and evacuation may eventually become necessary. If the decision to evacuate has been made, refer to evacuation procedures. Plan and procedure. Patient safety. Move patients from flooded areas to other locations within the facility as ordered by command staff. Clinics will transfer patients as needed. Clinics will cancel non-essential patient care services as determined by incident command staff. Incident command will contact contractors and agencies to assist in flooding issues. Incident command staff will provide regular updates and safety recommendations to staff, patients, and families as designed in the clinic evacuation plan. Resources will be requested as designed in the clinic evacuation plan. The facilities director will assess possible loss of water or pressure, power failure, loss of operations due to area or facility flooding. The clinic has equipment to address flooding of the grounds and measures to prevent water from flowing into the facility. Emergency response agencies will be notified if flood poses threat to clinical operations. Incident command staff will continue to assess the current threat and damage regularly and will initiate partial or full evacuation of departments and areas as necessary. Clinic managers should stay in close contact with incident command staff during an internal flood emergency to quickly respond when asked. The Department of Homeland Security recommends the run, hide, fight options for everyone in the U.S. The phrase is a quick way to remember what to do in an active shooter situation. In order: run. Getting away from the shooter or shooters is the top priority. Leave your things behind and run away. If safe to do so, warn others nearby. Call 911 when you are safe. Describe each shooter, their locations, and weapons. Hide. If you can't get away safely, find a place to hide. Get out of the shooter's view and stay very quiet. Silence your electronic devices and make sure they won't vibrate. Lock and block doors, close blinds, and turn off the lights. Don't hide in groups. Spread out along walls or hide separately to make it more difficult for the shooter. Try to communicate with the police silently through text messages or by putting a sign in an exterior window. Stay in place until law enforcement gives you the all clear. Fight. Your last resort when you are in immediate danger is to defend yourself. Commit to your actions and act aggressively to stop the shooter. Ambushing the shooter together with makeshift weapons such as chairs, fire extinguishers, scissors, and books can distract and disarm the shooter. No emergency plan can cover every intruder or active shooter scenario. The Run, Hide, Fight program helps you to rapidly analyze a situation and determine the best course of action.
When you walk into the office every morning, you never expect your day to be turned inside out by a freak event. Most workplaces have a plan for dealing with catastrophes like fires and extreme weather, but what about an active shooter? Today, we're talking about how to prepare for armed intruders and the 3 choices you have to protect yourself from harm. Run, hide, fight. So let's run through a simple scenario. A man walks into your workplace armed and looking for a specific person. If your building has effectively locked down its unmonitored entry points, like a back door or a loading area, the intruder will most likely enter through the front. Whoever has access to the phone system or a public announcement system should have a standard message ready to go for such an event.
There's a threat to your safety. Please seek shelter immediately. There's a threat to your safety. Please seek shelter immediately.
At this point, you have 3 options: run, hide, or fight. If you choose to run, you'll want to find the nearest exit and proceed with caution. Don't worry about rounding up your stuff. Leave it behind. Searching for your mobile phone or grabbing your bag could cost valuable seconds. If others around you choose not to run, you must leave them behind. Once you've made your decision to evacuate, you have little time to wait around for your coworkers. Stay on the lookout for others who may be unaware of the threat. Inform them of the danger and urge them to go with you as you escape to a safe area. Once you make it to the safe area, keep your hands visible and follow instructions from any law enforcement officers. Do not leave the safe area until they give you an all clear. If you choose to hide, you'll need to locate the closest door to you that locks. Maybe it's a storeroom or an office or a conference room. Once you enter the room, turn out the lights and lock the door. Blockade the door if possible. Turn off the ringer on your phone. If you have access to any social media accounts like Twitter or Facebook, silently post a message to your profile stating exactly where you are and any information you have about the incident. Authorities will be monitoring social media as soon as they are made aware of the intruder. As a last resort, and only when your life is in imminent danger, you may need to prepare to fight the intruder. Canvass the room for anything that can be used for a weapon. If the shooter enters the room, act as aggressively as possible towards them. Yell and create as much noise as you can. That way, your fellow coworkers, who are also hiding, and any law enforcement officers in the area know where the shooter is located. Just so you know, first responders' top priority is to eliminate any threats in the area. They won't stop to assist the injured or to rescue you before they can neutralize the shooter. When you encounter law enforcement, try to remain calm, following their every instruction, and keep your hands up and visible at all times. The key to surviving any workplace danger, let alone an active shooter event, is to have a plan and to practice that plan. Survey the area around your desk to locate the quickest place to exit and the closest rooms with locking doors. If your building has security, work with them periodically to hold an active shooter drill. Afterwards, everyone should get together to talk about what safety strategies worked best and ways your office could improve upon their response. Only you can judge the appropriate action to take if an armed intruder enters your office. You have 3 options: run, hide, fight.
Federal, state, and local emergency management experts and other official preparedness organizations all agree that drop, cover, and hold on is the appropriate action to reduce injury and death during earthquakes. During an earthquake, if you are inside a building, drop. Immediately drop to the ground where you are so the earthquake doesn't knock you around. Shaking can be so violent that you can't run or crawl, so drop to the floor. Take cover under a sturdy desk or table and hold onto it firmly. If you are not near a desk or table, drop to the floor against the interior wall and protect your head and neck with your arms. Cover. Cover your head and neck with your arms to protect yourself from falling debris. If you are in danger from falling objects and you can move safely, crawl for additional cover under a sturdy desk or table. If there's no shelter nearby, crawl away from windows, next to an interior wall. Try to stay away from glass, windows, outside doors, and anything that could fall, such as light fixtures or furniture. Hold on. The floor or the ground could jerk strongly sideways or out from under you. Hold on to any sturdy covering so you can move with it until the shaking stops. Stay where you are until the shaking stops. Do not run outside. Do not get in a doorway, as this does not provide protection from falling or falling objects, and you may not be able to remain standing. If you are outdoors when the shaking starts, move away from buildings, streetlights, and utility wires. Once in the open, drop, cover, and hold on. Stay there until the shaking stops. Trying to move during shaking puts you at risk. Earthquakes happen without any warning and may be so violent that you can't run or crawl. You'll most likely be knocked to the ground wherever you happen to be. So it is best to drop before the earthquake drops you and find nearby shelter or use your arms and hands to protect your head and neck. Drop, cover, and hold on gives you the best overall chance of quickly protecting yourself during an earthquake. The greatest danger is from falling and flying objects. Studies of injuries and deaths caused by earthquakes over the last several decades show that you are much more likely to be injured by falling or falling objects, such as lamps, glass, and bookcases, than to die in a collapsed building. Drop, cover, and hold on will protect you from most of these injuries. If there is no furniture nearby, you can still reduce the chance of injury from falling objects by getting down next to an interior wall and covering your head and neck with your arms. After an earthquake, when the shaking stops, look around. If the building is damaged and there is a clear path to safety, leave the building and go to an open space away from damaged areas. Once it's safe, monitor local news reports via battery-operated radio, TV, social media, and cell phone text alerts for emergency information and instructions. Check for injuries and provide assistance if you have training. Assist with rescues if you can do so safely. If facility evacuation is necessary, leave the building quickly but in an orderly manner, following the company's emergency evacuation plan. Clinics have their established assembly locations outside of the building. It is important to gather in one location so that all employees and visitors can be accounted for after a building evacuation. The facilities director or his or her designee checks utility lines and appliances for damage. Only the facilities director or his or her designee or a representative of the power company can shut off any valves or circuits. If there is a gas leak, the facilities director will shut off the main gas valve. If there is damage to wiring, the facilities director will shut off electrical power. The facilities director will report damage to the appropriate utility companies and follow their instructions. No one should use matches, lighters, or open flame appliances until it is determined that no gas leaks exist. Electrical switches or appliances should not be operated if gas leaks are suspected. Sparks can ignite gas from broken lines.
This video shows you what you should do in different situations as soon as an earthquake happens. The best way to be safe is to drop, cover, and hold. As soon as you feel an earthquake, drop down to the floor. Earthquakes are totally unpredictable. It could be a big one, so get down on your hands and knees before you're thrown to the ground. This protects you from falling, but also allows you to move if necessary. The next thing to do is to take cover. Cover your head and neck and your entire body, if possible, under a sturdy table. If there's no shelter nearby, get down near an interior wall or next to low-lying furniture that won't fall on you. Protect the back of your head and neck with your arms and hands. The shaking of an earthquake will probably move things around, so hold on until the shaking stops. In a major earthquake, it's absolutely vital that people respond immediately. Confusion about what to do can result in people being seriously injured or killed. Do not run outside. Trying to run in an earthquake is dangerous as the ground is moving and you can easily fall or be injured by flying debris or glass. Running outside is especially dangerous as glass, bricks or other building components may be falling. You're much safer to stay inside and shelter in a safe place. What about doorways? Just keep in mind that in many modern homes, doorways are no stronger than any other part of the structure and may not be a safe place to shelter. They may also have doors that could swing and injure you. Plan ahead for various scenarios. Look around you now. Identify safe places, such as under a sturdy piece of furniture or against an interior wall and away from windows and tall items that could fall on you. And that safe place should be no more than a few steps or less than 3 meters away to avoid injury from flying debris. An immediate move to the safe place can save lives. If you're inside a building, move no more than a few steps. Drop, cover and hold. In most buildings in New Zealand, you're safer if you stay where you are until the shaking stops. Stay indoors until the earthquake is over and you're sure that it's safe to exit. If you're in an elevator, drop, cover and hold. When the shaking stops, try and get out at the nearest floor if you can safely do so. You never know where you'll be when an earthquake happens. If you're outdoors when the shaking starts, move no more than a few steps away from buildings, trees, streetlights and power lines, and then drop, cover and hold. If there's nothing to cover under, drop down, protect the back of your head and neck with your hands, and hold that position till the shaking stops. In an earthquake, wherever you are, drop, cover, hold. It could save your life.
La Maestra is committed to safety and security programs designed to minimize the risk of incidents. An incident is an event that occurs involving an employee, patient, or member of the public that results in or could result in injury or financial loss or damage. An incident may include employee injury, theft, financial exploitation, medication error, abuse and neglect and/or suspected abuse or neglect. Any sentinel event, including an unexpected occurrence involving death or serious physical or psychological injury. Employees should report all incidents to their manager. An incident report form must be completed and signed by the employee involved. When an employee reports an injury to their manager, the manager should investigate the incident immediately and complete the incident report form. This should be sent to the Human Resources Department and Compliance Department within 24 hours. If the injury involves lost time, the Human Resources Department will complete appropriate forms and work in coordination with the manager of the employee to track the employee's status and implement the return to work or accommodated work plans if required. First aid injuries must be reported in writing on the incident report form. The purpose of the incident report is to document the exact details of the occurrence while they are fresh in the minds of those who witnessed the event. So if you are injured, it's important to report it to your supervisor immediately and fill out an incident report. You don't want to wait a week before filling out an incident report because they are time sensitive. Managers are responsible to ensure that their employees attend all required health and safety training sessions and work in collaboration with the compliance department to determine what training is required for each employee. The incident report is also our mechanism for patients to file a complaint when they perceive inappropriate care or unprofessional interactions related to departments. Directing the patient to complete the reporting form will help to process concerns in an efficient manner. The person with the most knowledge about the incident should complete the incident report. 1. Select the appropriate department and site of the incident. 2. List the information of the person reporting the incident. 3. Select the appropriate type of incident. 4. Enter the patient information. 5. List the provider information and staff member involved in the incident. 6. Include any witnesses, and on the second page, enter the details of the incident. Investigation is required when an incident occurs or near misses that could have resulted in a serious injury, critical injury, fatality, occupational illness, property damage, fire, or environmental release. The following investigation steps apply to all investigations. A. Assess the scene and document everything about the scene that seems important. This may include 1. Environmental conditions, condition of ground, weather if outside, lighting, wet floor signs present, or clinic conditions. 2. Hazards in area, electrical, mechanical, physical, chemical. 3. Hazards specific to affected individual, carrying heavy load, inappropriate action, medical condition, footwear. 4. Witnesses in area. B. Interviews. As quickly as possible after the incident, affected individuals and witnesses will be asked how the incident occurred. Ask the questions how, what, where, why, when, and who was involved. C. Determining what factors contributed to the incident. This may include wet conditions, faulty equipment, human error, lack of training, or fatigue. Incident reports are an important source of information for us because it helps collect data for certain trends or patterns that may need to be addressed. Incident reports can be used to educate, inform, and prevent the organization from experiencing the same adverse events. Copies can be obtained at the front desks of each clinic, on the intranet under Shared Documents, or reported to the Compliance Department at extension 3011. These reports are meant to be non-judgmental, factual reports of the problem, so these are highly encouraged. Staff may report compliance issues without fear of identification or retribution. Safety abuse reporting, child, elder. In regards to child abuse or elderly abuse in the state of California, we are all mandated reporters, which means we are obligated to report abuse anytime you reasonably suspect someone is a victim. We are all trained professionals who use our training and experience to evaluate a situation and report it during the course of providing treatment. Child abuse and/or child neglect can be any of the following: a physical injury inflicted on a child by another person other than by accidental means, the sexual abuse, assault, or exploitation of a child, the negligent treatment or maltreatment of a child by a person responsible for the child's welfare under circumstances indicating harm or threatened harm to the child's health or welfare. This is whether the harm or threatened harm is from acts or omissions on the part of the responsible person. The willful harming or endangerment of the person or health of a child, any cruel or inhumane corporal punishment, or any injury resulting in a traumatic condition. One does not have to be physically present or witness the abuse to identify suspected cases of abuse, or even have definite proof that a child may be subject to child abuse or neglect. Rather, the law requires that a person have a reasonable suspicion that a child has been the subject of child abuse or neglect. Red flags for abuse and neglect are often identified by observing the child's behavior, recognizing physical signs, and observations of dynamics during routine interactions with certain adults. Healthcare personnel who are mandated reporters include a physician, psychiatrist, psychologist, dentist, resident, intern, chiropractor, licensed nurse, dental hygienist, optometrist, marriage, family, and child counselor, licensed clinical social worker. All persons who are mandated reporters are required by law to report all known or suspected cases of child abuse or neglect. It is not the job of the mandated reporter to determine whether the allegations are valid. If child abuse or neglect is reasonably suspected, or if a pupil shares information with a mandated reporter, leading him or her to believe abuse or neglect has taken place, the report must be made. Mandated reporters are required to give their names when making a report. However, the reporter's identity is kept confidential. Reports of suspected child abuse are also confidential. Mandated reporters have immunity from state, criminal, or civil liability for reporting as required. Community members have an important role in protecting children from abuse and neglect. While not mandated by law to do so, if child abuse or neglect is suspected, a report should be filed with qualified and experienced agencies that will investigate the situation. To make a report, an employee must contact an appropriate local law enforcement or county child welfare agency listed in the emergency telephone numbers list. The report should be made immediately over the telephone and should be followed up in writing. After the report is made, the local law enforcement agency is required to investigate all reports. Cases may also be investigated by child welfare services when allegations involve abuse or neglect within families. The Child Protective Services is the major organization to intervene in child abuse and neglect cases in California. Existing law provides for services to abused and neglected children and their families. Abuse of an elder or dependent adult is defined as the following. Physical abuse includes sexual abuse, neglect, financial abuse, abandonment, isolation, abduction, deprivation of goods or services that are necessary to avoid physical harm or mental suffering. Again, as a mandated reporter, you are required to report if you witness an incident, receive information or evidence, whether visual or audible, or an elder or dependent adult discloses an incident that appears to constitute abuse. How to report elder abuse. Report the known or suspected instance of abuse by telephone or through a confidential internet reporting tool immediately or as soon as practically possible. If reported by telephone, a written report shall be sent, or an internet report shall be made through the confidential internet reporting tool within 2 working days. If the suspected abuse results in serious bodily injury, a telephone report shall be made to the local law enforcement agency immediately, but also no later than within 2 hours. You may use Form SOC 341 with a report of suspected dependent adult elder abuse and instructions. Standards of conduct describe La Maestra's expectations that all employees conduct themselves in an ethical manner. Appropriate mechanisms are in place for anyone to report noncompliance and potential fraud, waste, and abuse. Reported issues will be addressed and corrected. Standards of conduct communicate to employees is everyone's responsibility, from the top of the organization to the bottom. Ethical and professional standards. Practice personnel must comply with and perform their services consistent with high ethical and professional standards. They will treat patients, coworkers, and others in a professional manner with honesty, fairness, dignity, and respect. Practice personnel must comply with all applicable policies and procedures. La Maestra personnel must comply with all applicable federal and state laws, regulations, and third-party payer program requirements. La Maestra personnel will not discriminate against other personnel, patients, or others on the basis of race, color, sex, religion, age, national origin, ancestry, disability, or sexual orientation. Federal and state laws prohibit paying, offering, or receiving anything of value to induce referrals for healthcare business unless certain conditions are met. La Maestra personnel will not offer, solicit, pay, or accept anything of value in exchange for healthcare referrals. This applies to offering or receiving any money, gifts, free or discounted items or services, professional courtesies, or other arrangements with the intent to induce referrals. This applies to transactions involving potential referral sources, including transactions with other healthcare providers, vendors, or patients. Violations may subject the organization and its personnel to criminal and administrative penalties. Federal and state laws affect contracts, agreements, and other financial relationships with physicians, practitioners, vendors, and other referral sources. Privacy and confidentiality. Staff will maintain the confidentiality of patients' protected health information as required by practices' privacy policies and applicable law, including but not limited to HIPAA and its accompanying regulations. Staff must not access patient information unless they have a need to access the information because of their job duties. To the extent allowed by law, La Maestra personnel must maintain the confidentiality of communications and records containing confidential information concerning coworkers, communications and records relating to the organization's confidential financial or business operations, trade secrets, credentializing or peer review actions, documents prepared in anticipation of litigation, and communications with legal counsel for the organization. Fraud, waste, and abuse. Although no precise measure of healthcare fraud exists, those intent on abusing federal healthcare programs can cost taxpayers billions of dollars while putting beneficiaries' health and welfare at risk. You play a vital role in protecting the integrity of the Medicare program. To combat fraud and abuse, you need to know how to protect the organization from engaging in abusive practices and/or civil or criminal law violations. Fraud typically includes any of the following: knowingly submitting or causing to be submitted false claims or making misrepresentations of fact to obtain a federal healthcare payment for which no entitlement would otherwise exist; knowingly soliciting, receiving, offering, and/or paying remuneration to induce or reward referrals for items or services reimbursed by federal healthcare programs; making prohibited referrals for certain designated health services; billing Medicare for appointments the patient failed to keep. Abuse describes practices that either directly or indirectly result in unnecessary costs to the Medicare program. Abuse includes any practice inconsistent with providing patients with medically necessary services meeting professionally recognized standards. Examples of abuse include billing for unnecessary medical services, charging excessively for services or supplies, misusing codes on a claim, such as upcoding or upbundling codes. The detection, correction, and prevention of fraud, waste, and abuse are essential to maintaining a healthcare system that is affordable for everyone. State and federal law enforcement agencies are increasingly focused on investigating healthcare fraud, waste, and abuse. Even if you don't intentionally misrepresent facts, you could still be committing fraud, waste, and abuse if you are paid by the healthcare system but are not actually entitled to the money. Everyone who performs a function that in some way supports La Maestra business is required to report suspected fraud, waste, and abuse to one of the compliance departments at extension 3011.
As you know, HIPAA is everyone's business, from the medical staff to business associates, and for good reason. It protects our fundamental rights to privacy and confidentiality, patients and public alike. Since first enacted in 1996, HIPAA standards have been enhanced and strengthened. The HITECH Act and Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, or GINA, ensured HIPAA standards gave the public increased protection and control of sensitive personal health information. The HIPAA Omnibus Rule issued by the HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, incorporates the requirements of each one of these rules. HIPAA privacy and security, as well as the added safeguards mandated by HITECH and GINA, into one final rule. And it strengthens the ability of HHS to vigorously enforce HIPAA regulations. If you're a healthcare provider, health plan, or a healthcare clearinghouse that transmits health information in electronic form, a so-called covered entity, or a business associate or subcontractor, non-healthcare covered entity, you need to comply. In this program, we'll walk through the requirements of the Omnibus Rule, including final privacy and security rules and the breach notification and enforcement rules set forth in the HITECH Act. As you know, HIPAA privacy restricts use and disclosure of protected health information, or PHI, in whatever form: oral, recorded, on paper, or sent electronically. In simple terms, if health information can be used to connect the patient to the information, name, address, physician's notes, or billing information, for example, it's our job to protect it. Do you use or disclose PHI? If so, always follow the minimum necessary rule. Use the least amount needed to get the job done. Requests for PHI directed to another business associate must also be limited to the minimum necessary, according to the Omnibus Rule. PHI can't be used or disclosed to anyone unless permitted or required by the Privacy Rule, with few exceptions. PHI is used when it's shared, examined, applied, or analyzed by a covered entity. PHI is disclosed when it's released, transferred, or accessed by anyone outside that covered entity. Permitted use and disclosure of PHI includes treatment, payment, and healthcare operations, with authorization agreement from the patient or for disclosure to the patient. For incidental uses like physicians talking to patients in semi-private rooms or sign-in sheets. Use and disclosure of PHI is required when requested or authorized by the patient or when required by the HHS. Patients cannot restrict disclosure of PHI for treatment. Healthcare providers need access to PHI to deliver quality care. Patients can restrict disclosure of their PHI to a health plan or the health plan's business associate if the disclosure is for treatment for which the individual has paid out of pocket in full. Providers should develop methods of flagging the restricted PHI. It is a patient's right to have access to their PHI, but some requests for access may be denied. Remember, if access to PHI is denied, you're required to give patients written explanation of why and how they can complain to your facility's privacy officer or directly to the HHS. What about assigned patient authorization? For treatment, payment, and day-to-day healthcare operations, patient authorization is not necessary, and PHI, the minimum necessary, can be shared without permission or authorization in the interest of public health and to inform agencies during disaster relief, to control and prevent disease, to report victim abuse, to monitor the safety of FDA-regulated products, for health oversight activities to ensure quality of care, and for certain law enforcement purposes and to comply with a HIPAA investigation. Authorization is not needed to use or disclose PHI to maintain your agency's patient directory or inform family and other identified persons involved in patient care. Patient agreement is necessary. Assigned authorization is required for use and disclosure of psychotherapy notes unless use or disclosure is required by the healthcare provider, for example, or permitted or required by law. The Omnibus Rule also sets new limits on how information is used and disclosed for marketing and fundraising. Marketing is any communication about a product or service that encourages patients to use or purchase the product or gives or sells PHI to a third party for marketing. Marketing or sale of PHI without patient authorization is now prohibited. Authorization forms for marketing purposes must describe the intended use and disclosure of the person's PHI and the right to revoke authorization at any time. Exceptions to marketing authorization requirements include face-to-face communications, communications that do not promote a product or service, communications to inform patients about government-sponsored programs like Medicare, refill reminders and communications about a drug or biologic currently prescribed to the patient. The Omnibus Rule also expands the amount of PHI available to fundraisers, but communications must include a simple method, a toll-free number or email address, for example, so patients can opt out of future communications. HIPAA grants patients certain rights over their PHI. Patients have the right to receive a Notice of Privacy Practices outlining use and disclosure of their PHI. The Notice of Privacy Practices is provided on the first date of service delivery or as soon as possible after an emergency. Have PHI communicated to them by alternate means and at alternate locations to protect confidentiality. Designate a third party as the recipient of their ePHI. Inspect, correct, and request an amendment to their PHI. View or request copies of PHI and request copies of his or her electronic medical record in an electronic form. Request an accounting of disclosures for up to 6 years prior to the request. Receive information on contact persons to call with complaints and privacy concerns. If the patient is incapable of exercising their rights, a designated personal representative can exercise those rights, including inspecting patient's PHI. All the rights normally exercised by the patient apply to the personal representative. As you know, HIPAA security safeguards ePHI, protected health information in electronic form. In simple terms, it protects the confidentiality and the integrity of ePHI, meaning once electronic health information is created, it can't be tampered with. HIPAA security also protects the availability of PHI, so electronic PHI can only be accessed by people with the authority to do so. 3 safeguards cover all the procedures and systems you use to protect ePHI, from the time it's created to the time of its disposal and all the time in between. Executive teams, managers, and HIPAA security officials are responsible for administrative safeguards to protect all ePHI. Rules on workplace security are included, such as who can access ePHI and who cannot, and who has limited access, such as business associates and subcontractors. Systems are created to detect, correct, and prevent security breaches. Security incident policies outline how to respond to security breaches. Contingency plans protect ePHI during emergencies and natural disasters and create off-site backup systems that can be retrieved quickly. Ongoing audits and evaluations make sure your facility is in compliance and stays that way. Never share your password with anyone, or they could breach security in your name. Remember, individuals are subject to the same enforcement penalties as healthcare providers. Physical safeguards protect physical things, your computer systems, high-tech equipment, and the facility where ePHI is stored. Physical access controls limit access to ePHI and make sure authorized persons can access data when they need it. Remember, passwords should change regularly so they don't fall into the wrong hands. Unique user IDs like this one verify if the person logging in is who he or she claims to be. Facility access controls protect areas where ePHI is housed. Parking restrictions control access, as do security guards, ID badges, and sign-in sheets. Device and media controls keep ePHI secure when moving or disposing of hardware or software, such as hard drives or anything that contains ePHI, both inside and outside of your facility. Your facility's workstation guidelines secure areas where you access ePHI and guard against unauthorized access. Technical safeguards are all about the technology that keeps ePHI safe, including access controls to ensure that only authorized personnel can access ePHI. Authentication controls verify who's logging onto your facility's system. Monitoring systems track who's logging in successfully and who's trying to log in but failing. Digital signatures make sure stored PHI is not tampered with or destroyed. Integrity controls, like virus protection, protect ePHI from alteration or destruction. Encryption programs protect ePHI transmitted over open networks. Instant reporting systems, such as alarms, alert authorities of suspicious behavior. As you know, the Omnibus rules strengthen the requirements of the high-tech breach notification and enforcement rules. Unless an exception applies, an impermissible access, acquisition, use, or disclosure of PHI is presumed to be a breach, unless the covered entity or business associate demonstrates that there's a low probability that the PHI has been compromised. To determine whether there's a low probability, the covered entity or business associate must conduct a risk assessment. Your employer must consider the following factors to decide if a breach should be reported. Did the information include patient identifiers? Who may have had unauthorized access to the exposed data? Was data inappropriately viewed? And was the risk resolved quickly? Patients must be notified when their PHI has been compromised due to a breach, including unauthorized use or disclosure of PHI inside your facility and outside. Notification must happen within 60 days of the breach. All breaches must be reported to the Secretary of HHS. The media must also be notified of breaches affecting 500 or more people. Penalties for violations and noncompliance can be significant, with a maximum penalty of $1.5 million per violation. Penalties apply to violations by covered entities and business associates and their subcontractors. Individuals, covered entities, and business associates are subject to the same tiers of increasing civil monetary penalties depending on level of intent and neglect. The Omnibus Rule also expands the definition of business associates to anyone who creates, receives, maintains, or transmits PHI on behalf of a covered entity, including a business associate's subcontractors. All are directly liable for breaches, as well as individuals responsible for a violation or noncompliance. Reasonable lack of knowledge of a violation is no longer a legitimate defense. A state's attorney general can also bring civil actions against an individual on behalf of patients adversely affected by violations of the Omnibus Rule. Ongoing audits and evaluations make sure your facility is in compliance at all times. Under the Omnibus Rule, business associates and subcontractors are also potential audit subjects, as well as covered entities. If an audit report indicates a serious compliance issue, HHS may initiate a further compliance review. Compliance reviews may also be sparked by breach notifications and third-party complaints. Most HIPAA compliance reviews have focused on the failure of covered entities to adequately monitor employees' handling of PHI. Improper use and disclosure of PHI and ePHI, improper use of personal health records, and thefts of PHI have resulted in large sums of money paid by covered entities. It's your job to do your part to make sure this does not happen in your facility. The HIPAA Omnibus Rule is serious business. It helps us protect our patients' sensitive personal information. It also protects everyone's fundamental right to privacy and security. Do your part to comply. Make sure you understand the HIPAA Omnibus Rule, which includes HIPAA privacy, security, and breach notification and enforcement rules. Protect your patient's personal health information and encourage others to do the same.
When children and teens are receiving health care, the general rule is that parental consent is needed. However, there are situations when parental consent may be a barrier to receiving health care, and many professional medical organizations, as well as the law, have determined that there are exceptions to the general rule of parental consent. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and the American Academy of Family Physicians all have policies on the provision of confidential health care for adolescents. In general, they all state that teenagers should have access to confidential services for sensitive issues, that parental participation should be encouraged when appropriate, and that the clinician's assurance of confidentiality is conditional. Of utmost importance is for the clinician to provide the best possible care for the adolescent. Sensitive services are services that require some form of confidentiality in the way services are provided and the way medical records are disclosed. California Family Code provides that a minor may, without parental consent, receive a number of sensitive services, including outpatient mental health treatment and counseling for children 12 years and older. The minor must be mature enough to participate in the following treatment of either 1. being in danger of causing harm to self or others. Or 2, being an alleged victim of incest or child abuse. Confidential care means that the clinician does not reveal any information to anyone without the patient's consent. Confidential care for adolescents is important to encourage timely access to care for problems that are sensitive in nature. These concerns include sexually transmitted diseases, contraceptive care, pregnancy, mental health issues, and substance abuse. Adolescents are more willing to communicate with and seek health care from physicians who assure confidentiality. In most cases, parents must consent to health care on behalf of their minor children. However, there are situations in which minors must or may consent for their own care and opportunities, in which other adults may consent to care on the minor's behalf. California minor consent and confidentiality laws has developed resources to support healthcare providers by providing useful information to help them better understand the rights of minors to consent to specific kinds of healthcare in California. Attached is a chart that summarizes the rights of minors and third parties to consent to a minor's healthcare in California. Staff must be educated regarding the confidentiality laws that pertain to adolescents. For more information, reference materials for California minor consent and confidentiality laws are available for all staff. Informed consent to medical treatment is fundamental, where patients have the right to receive information and ask questions about recommended treatments so that they can make well-considered decisions about care. Successful communication in the patient-provider relationship builds trust and supports shared decision-making. The process of informed consent happens when communication between a patient and physician results in the patient's authorization or agreement to undergo a specific medical treatment. In seeking a patient's informed consent, providers should A. Assess the patient's ability to understand relevant medical information and the implications of treatment alternatives, and to make an independent, voluntary decision. B. Present relevant information accurately and sensitively, in keeping with the patient's preferences for receiving medical information. The provider should include information about 1. The diagnosis, 2. The nature and purpose of recommended interventions, 3. The burdens, risks, and expected benefits of all options, including foregoing treatment. C. Document the informed consent conversation and the patient's decision in the medical record. When the patient has provided specific written consent, the consent form must be included in the record. In emergencies, when a decision must be made urgently, the patient is not able to participate in decision-making, and the patient's surrogate is not available, providers may initiate treatment without prior informed consent. In such situations, the provider should inform the patient at the earliest opportunity and obtain consent for ongoing treatment in keeping with these guidelines. Once the patient is asked to sign the consent form, the form is a legal document that lets your provider proceed with the treatment plan. Consent is given voluntarily, without coercion, and may be withdrawn. The patient is competent and able to understand the nature and consequences of the proposed treatment or procedure.